The women's movement in India is quite old. We draw our history from the involvement of women in the nationalist movement for independence in India. But then the more recent movement is a movement that started around the 70s. And some of the questions on which we have been fighting have to do with equal rights for women, citizenship rights, which are there on paper, but you don't actually see them so much in practice. And within that, the issue of violence against women is very important, because like with Japan, our society is very traditional, and male and female roles are quite well defined. So it's really difficult to jump that. Although if you have the opportunity and if you have the possibility, Indian women have a huge desire to change the conditions of their lives, and they fight very, very strong obstacles to do that if they get the opportunity. So things like education are very important, health is very important. These are all issues for the women's movement. We don't have one women's movement that works all over the country because the country is so different. So in different regions you will have activism on different issues. But on issues that are common, we will get together. So you have, it's very diverse, very different. I think one of the things that I find very interesting about Japanese society and Japanese women and the Japanese women's movement is that Japan is a society which has moved a lot into modernity. You know, you see it all around you in technology, you see it in the way your cities have grown, you see it in the way people dress, how they travel across the world. And yet it has been quite difficult for you to sort of alter male-female relations in ways that actually change the status of women. So from what I understand, marriage and family are big things and are primarily the responsibility of the woman. So also in our society, so many Japanese women work outside, and in economic employment you are making a big contribution, much more than us. But from what I understand, once a woman is married, she is expected to stay in the home. So these are things which are similar for us, and it's interesting for us to learn how Japanese women deal with them and how they are different also, how they've managed to change some things. And the other very interesting thing for me as personally is the way in which Japan historically has looked at the war and the memories of the war, and how Japanese women particularly have tried to examine that history from a women's point of view, from a gendered point of view, and see what comes out of it when you look at it like that. So to bring forgotten histories to light. I don't have a secret to overcome the difficulties. I think that, each society has its own kind of difficulties that women have to overcome. And those difficulties are both cultural and traditional, and they're also economic, they're also social. They also change with your own circumstances and as you age, as you grow up. So the difficulties I might have had as a young woman in India, I don't have now. I have may have other kinds of difficulties. To me, what has always actually been a really important principle, so I suppose you could call it a secret if you like, is to try and understand the other person's point of view, to not get angry about it, sometimes to laugh about it, and to see if you can think in your own mind what is the best way to deal with it. Now, when I was young, I used to get angry. Now, I don't get angry. I sometimes laugh and I sometimes think. So, I suppose you could call that a secret, but I think it's what everybody learns as life goes along. I was interested in Okinawa because of its history. The women in Okinawa have dealt with the sexual violence as a result of the American bases being there for a long time. They have also looked at the whole question of comfort women for a long time there. I believe there were some 145 comfort stations in Okinawa. And another thing which I was not aware of, and which I discovered on this visit, and I'm really grateful for it because I found it very, very moving, was the history of young women who were schoolgirls who became nurses and who had to live really difficult lives in the caves in Okinawa to look after wounded soldiers and others. So, in a sense, Okinawa's history of dealing with memories of the war, with keeping the idea of peace as a really central idea. And another history that I was not really aware of was the Okinawans' sense of being separate from or discriminated against by what they call mainland Japan. And for me, this had a lot of resonances with the histories in the northeast of India especially, where people feel very much as if they are ignored by mainland India, as if they are looked on differently, and they are also over there having to deal with a strong army presence. Of course, it's the Indian army, not foreign bases, but nevertheless some of the issues of sexual violence really are the same. So, all of these things I learned, but especially moving for me were the discussions with Okinawan feminists who are dealing with war memory, who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, who are talking to survivors of violence. And we had a meeting in which they came and spoke, and it was really very emotional meeting because I felt that they trusted me enough to tell their stories. And I felt that's a really valuable trust somehow to take back to India, to talk to Indian feminists there. So, all these different experiences were part of my experience there. And because I'm a publisher, I'm also interested in publishing. So, I met with a publisher there of Shinjo-san of Border Inc. And again, the kind of publishing you do away from the mainstream, and how you do a publishing that is so rooted in the politics of where you belong was something that resonated with me a lot. My work, it's as you're right, it's 20 years ago, and I was really pleased that it was published in Japan. I think that it is part of a sort of interest across the world in different countries in looking at women's personal stories and seeing how those stories open up new dimensions in history. In my case, I deal with the violence against women and especially sexual violence at the time of Indian independence. But for example, in Okinawa, Harumi Miyagi-san has written an account of her life, which is really important. Several Okinawan feminists have essays looking at the war and sexual violence. I think all these works fall into the same broad international category and exploration. And I think that this is really, I hope, changing the way we look at history and gendering the perspective on history, which in a sense I also believe is so important for maintaining peace in the world today. Because, you know, the way you understand war and political conflict, understood from the male perspective, it seems like men go out and fight, then the fighting is over and you have a peace treaty and that's the end. But actually that is not the end, because battles and political conflicts change so much in society. They transform so much in negative ways. And the work of recovering peace, putting together the fabric of society, all of that is left to women. The long-term impact is on children. So this kind of exploration tries to bring that kind of perspective. And to me that is an important perspective today in the world. And my work is not alone in it. I'm proud that it's part of a whole body of work across the world that's doing this. I think one of the things for us working with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation has been the foundation's flexibility and the possibility, the sort of how should I say it, the matching of the areas that we are interested in working in and the foundation believes are important to work in. And one of those is the question of the marginalized culture of the northeast of India. So for us, we have been working in the northeast of India for a long time. And when the Sasakawa Peace Foundation came in and we began talking and we discovered that we had this common interest, then it became possible for us to work in that region more intensely, more productively, and more creatively. Some partners do not want to engage in a genuine dialogue and discussion and discuss with you and say, well, I don't think that that is quite the thing we want to do. I don't think that is quite the right thing to do. Maybe we can rethink it. So some partners are very frightened of somebody in another country and they will just say, okay, do what you like, do what you like. With Sasakawa, you can have a discussion. And that also I really value.